Yeah, so this leads us into the Vogler, and I think maybe at this point we can jump between Kernberger and Vogler and kind of
Yeah,
look
yeah,
at all
yeah.
this,
We can
but
jump
but
around.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe we go directly into the Vogler just a little bit here, and then we can backtrack to describe why I think that the Vogler is connected to Beethoven in particular. But Vogler's book that I discussed here, the Kurpfalzschen Tonschule, it's what Giorgio Sanguinetti would call a Zibaldoni or Robert Yerdingen, and effectively it's a book that Vogler would have written probably initially for himself. It's not quite as Zibaldoni because it's very organized and it's intended for others, whereas Zibaldoni was intended for the person writing it. But it is essentially a book that collects a massive amount of material in as short pages as possible. It's extremely dense, and in this book has basically everything you need to start becoming a composer. And
Mm,
it includes the rule of the octave, it includes diminution, it includes the solfeggio exercises, modulation
mm,
exercises. I mean, it's a really remarkable treatise. Very little text in this book. He later wrote a text to accompany it, but initially it was just this is the book that he was going to use in Mannheim. And the nice thing about this book too that I was so amazed by is Leopold was aware of it. So this is in
mm.
1778. So Beethoven would have been 8 years old at the time, and Leopold uh, wrote a message to Mozart, who was then in Mannheim. Now, in Mannheim, in Germany, that's where Vogler had gotten a position of vice Kapellmeister. And
Yes.
Mozart was frustrated by this because he wanted that position. And so we get a lot of comments from Mozart about Vogler being a charlatan and so
Mm,
forth. And I think historically that's damaged Vogler's reputation, and
mm,
Vogler is seen as sort of this wild, crazy person.
mm,
And I think more and more people are looking into Vogler and said, yeah, he had some quirks, but he also brought a lot to the table and was a very important historical figure. Anyway, he's in Mannheim, and Mozart's father Leopold wrote to Amadeus and said, "I hear that Vogler at Mannheim has brought out a book. This is the Kurpfalzsche Tonschule, which the government of the Palatinate has prescribed for the use of all clavier teachers in the country, both for singing and composition. I must see
mm.
this book, and I have already ordered it. There must be some sound stuff in it, for he could copy the clavier method from C.P. Bach's book, the outlines of singing method from Tosi and Agricola, and the rules of composition and harmony from Fuchs, Riepel, Marper, Mattheson, Spies, Scheibe, D'Alembert, Rameau, and a host of others, and then boil them down into a shorter system, such as I have long had in mind. Thus I am
Mm.
anxious to see whether his ideas accord with mine. You ought to have the book, for such works are useful when giving lessons. As
Yeah.
a teacher, one is led by experience to adopt certain good methods of dealing with this or that problem, and these good methods do not all come at once." And
Don't
I found that
reinvent the wheel. Oh my goodness. As a teacher,
yes,
don't reinvent the
and
wheel.
yeah, and you can see here too that Leopold is anticipating what's going to be in Vogler's book, and I think he nailed it. Vogler, it's really combines so many of these ideas. You see the rule of the octave, but crucially in Vogler's book, in addition to the rule of the octave, you have the fundamental bass notated in small notes under the rule of the octave. So
Mm,
theory is coupled with practice throughout the entire book, and that's pretty phenomenal.
right. And so, yeah, so that book, it's guaranteed that you think Beethoven would have been exposed to this book.
I don't think it's guaranteed. And this article, I think the main critique, if someone were to critique it, is that it's speculative. It's very speculative for sure. Um, and I think, but I'm influenced a lot by Derek Remish's work, who you've had on, who
Mm,
kind of reconstructs J.S. Bach's pedagogy. And
yes.
so I'm creating kind of the paratext, like what are the books that Beethoven had as disposable at the time? What were likely the best ones that he would have used? Do we have any evidence that links these to Beethoven in any way? Now, the evidence for Vogler's book depends on um, a couple of things. Number one, Vogler likely visited Bonn, and so I had a massive footnote. I have a terrible tendency of maybe it's a good thing, but I like rich footnotes. Um, but Franz Wegeler, which is one of Beethoven's friends, said in one of his books, "I do not know if he enjoyed lessons with the court organist Gilles van der Eden." This is about Beethoven. After Pfeiffer's departure from Bonn, so that connects Beethoven to Pfeiffer and Gilles van der Eden in terms of the pedagogy. And he says, but I believe it because otherwise I do not know of anyone else from whom he could have learned the technical handling of the organ. As the famous organist Abbe Vogler played in Bonn, I sat by Beethoven in his sickbed. So there's some things
There
that
you
we don't,
go.
yeah. And so clearly Vogler was in Bonn. And then we also see a guest
How
book entry
old?
from,
So
yeah, go ahead.
How old would Beethoven have been at that time?
Yeah, I think it's not clear to me exactly, but I think probably, I want to say between 8 and 10.
Okay.
And now there's another entry in a visiting book, a guest book in Bonn, and it's in 1790 in the Bonn Literary Society, and it reads, on the 14th of August, Abbe Vogler, director of the Musikalischen Academy in Stockholm, visited, and he had a competition with Haydn and Beethoven
What?
on the organ in 1785
Wait,
in the
what?
French. Yeah. So uh
Wait,
and
how have
so
I not heard about this? That's epic.
yeah, it is epic. Yeah, it would have been very cool to see Vogler, Haydn, and Beethoven battle it out on the organ. Beethoven at the time would have been 15. So the
This is
details
like
of
the
this fact,
greatest anecdote of all time.
yeah,
Wow.
it's so cool. I mean, Vogler was traveling all over the place, like, and he was in
Yeah.
Mannheim, and so this when this book is governed or made to be used by all the clavier teachers in the Palatinate. I mean, that's a big region of which Bonn, I think, was a part of it. It's kind of like on the border, but Mannheim was the center. Now, Beethoven's early compositions, his variations on a piece by Dresler, were engraved in Mannheim. So Nefe seems to have had connections in Mannheim. Vogler was working. So it just
Wow.
the evidence that links Vogler to Beethoven to me seems very convincing.
Yeah.
And so then the other thing that Nottebohm did is he said that Beethoven wrote these really strange preludes for piano or organ. Weird, right? That they're one of some of the weirdest, strangest Beethoven pieces that we have, and they just modulate through all the keys extremely fast and then come back around. And so this is an exercise piece, right? I mean, this must have been assigned as sort of a modulation exercise, and Vogler and sorry Gustav Nottebohm connects these pieces with these modulation circles in Vogler's treatise. And I basically said, like, how close are these connected? You know, like this musical circle idea is a big idea for a long time. But even CPE Bach says, you know, this circle is a really great thing for planning a piece, a fantasy or something, but don't modulate through every key. That, like, you don't need to do that. Right? He explicitly says that. Now Vogler is the opposite. Vogler shows the circle, and we can even show one of these examples. I think it's
Oh yeah.
example 70.
Okay. Let me find it. Okay.
Yeah. So this you could see it. He interprets it literally. So this is the Weiche Tonarten, so the minor, soft, and we modulate through keys by fifth, and he shows you the pattern, and you can sit down and practice this, and you have to turn the circle as you do it, and so it's extremely literal about taking this circle of fifths and creating a modulation pattern that you can do with it. So this prelude here, this is the Opus 39, the second prelude, and if you look at the modulation patterns, they're almost all the exact same. So we have a descending movement that goes 1 7 6 and then 2 in the old key, and in the new key, the 6 becomes a 2 and the 2 becomes a 5, and so it's a scale mutation. Effectively, that's probably how Beethoven would have understood this modulation, and every single one of them is the almost the exact same here. Now, when you look at Vogler's in example 30, I break it down. I just show it very clearly in one example. And this matches Vogler's pattern that he gives in his
His
example
wheel.
31, in his wheel. There is one difference, and that's that rather than the pure descent, Beethoven adds the new scale degree 5 of the new key after the descent, but extremely similar to Vogler's circle. So the argument, I think, is that Beethoven likely encountered this circle and then wrote a piece inspired by it. That's how I'm seeing it. Now, the other point of evidence is that these two preludes treat the seam between C sharp and D flat differently. And in Vogler's work, we find different modulation patterns between these keys. And so another thing about Vogler's work that's really interesting is that he includes a ridiculous number of modulations from C major to every other key, and from E major to every other key, G sharp to every other key. And so it's comprehensive. So if someone wanted to learn modulation for church, let's say, which Beethoven worked in a church, which he would have had to know how to modulate smoothly to connect different parts of the liturgy and so forth. This Vogler book would have been a great source for that. And of course, Vogler was a church musician as well,
Yeah.
who studied with other church musicians like Padre Martini and Francesco Bellotti.
Yeah, he did organ improvisations around Europe, so he was well known, quite a well known figure then. Okay, so yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really so we connected. So we have modulations. What about solfeggio? You even tie that in to his training. Now, when we think of solfeggio now in the
Yeah.
current uh the fad, the excitement now is of course the hexachordal thing. But I wonder,
Yeah.
is there some echo of that in
Yeah.
Beethoven's learning?
Yeah. Absolutely. So in example 46, um, we find hexachordal solemnization. So we have
Really?
ut, re, mi, fa,
Wow.
sol, la, and you mutate on the sol. So you have these two
Same book.
hexachords right there.
Same book.
Same book. This is the Vogler work.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. And so he probably would have learned it like this. Now, Vogler's work is eminently practical. So if we go to example 47, we have a singing exercise, and you see we'll wait, let it load here. These are all high resolution. And so we have ut, re, mi, fa, sol, and so forth. And so you would sit at the keyboard, play these, and sing this Erste Singleiter hinauf. And so you would be working on your solfege with working on your keyboard. And if we go to subsequent examples, he introduces more complex singing examples. So maybe example 51 is a good one to go to.
Wow.
Now this is we don't have the solfege anymore. We're at a little later stage,
Yep.
but we're leaping triadically. So we're singing all of these things. Now we have an actual, and he shows you here too. We have the keyboard practice, and then underneath that he even has the Hauptklang. So he couples the theory, the fundamental bass theory, with the solfeggio with keyboard practice. And then if you analyze this excerpt, you come to the conclusion that it's actually, and so in measure 52, you see that both of these form small little themes. So we open with a tonic prolongation and then close with an expanded cadential progression. So they're so practical, and they embed so many elements that would have been very useful for Beethoven to learn.
You've got to hand it to this guy. He was a pretty thorough teacher in terms of like his materials. He brought the materials to the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. And another great example, if we could briefly take a look at it, is example 54.
Okay.
So in this example, we have at the very bottom, we have the figured bass, so the basso continuo, and we have a very simple. It opens with a tonic prolongation, dum bum 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 dum bum. So we have a very clear kind of tonic prolongation into a cadence, and then on top we have singing, and you can see the very top here, the Hallelujah, is then he adds a rhythm to it, and the K, and then L he adds more rhythm, and then we have diminutions M and N,
Yeah.
and so he's building this structural idea that you can decorate these notes. So diminution is built into a singing exercise over a clear theme pattern.
Yeah.
Just remarkable.
Yeah. That's really. Now I wondered. So this book, how big is it actually?
It's about 30 pages.
Oh, that's actually not that long. It's action packed then, basically.
Oh yeah, every single page is absolutely crammed. I think I have one full example. Actually, I have two pages from the entire book. Let me see if I can pull. Actually, I have the page with the rule of the octave on it. That's pretty fun. Let me see if I can pull that up here.
See if I can. Example 13. No, that's Kernberger. Let's see. Vogler's rule of the octave. Is that 58?
Yeah, that's 58, but I have the entire page
Okay, maybe
that
is
it's
it this one?
on.
I think this is it. 57?
What example?
No, at the bottom here. Is this the rule of the
Yeah,
octave
that's
then?
it. That's it. What
Okay,
example is that?
I think this is 57. I see the
Oh
here's
yeah,
the
it is.
sol
Yeah, exactly.
there's the
That's it. Yeah,
solfeggio
sorry, I
here.
couldn't. Yeah, yeah. So here's a full page. So if we just look at this page briefly here, we have the Zweite Singleiter. So we have the solfeggio on the top here,
Yeah.
and notice we also have the hexachordal mutation on sol. So sol becomes ut. We have a keyboard pattern, and then if you go down further, figure 3 shows the hexachordal mutation quite clearly. Then he has little diminution patterns, uh, cadential embellishments, then the rule of the octave in figure 9. And you'll notice in the figure 9 that he shows you the rule of the octave, and then in small notes labeled
Yeah.
Hauptklang, that's the fundamental bass. And he
Right.
shows you that if you look at the fundamental bass, well, then the figured bass above the fundamental bass is a 7, right?
Mm,
And so that's what
that's
those
right.
little numbers underneath there
Yeah.
mean. And then right below that is the alternate manner of harmonizing the scale. So the 5/6 chain up and the 7/6 down. And this is the exact similar presentation that we find in Partimento sources. So you get the rule of the octave, and then you get the 7/6 suspension chain downwards and the 5/6 up. And
Yeah.
this 5/6 up and 7/6 down can be embellished with chromatic harmonies, which is what Beethoven does in his prelude, his first prelude for organ or piano, the strange one that modulates through all the keys. So, yeah, I mean, it's just like the amount of
Yeah.
information on just this page alone is enormous.
So yeah, it's definitely the rule of the. You have the descending. You have the augmented sixth there on the scale
Mhm.
degree. So yeah, it's pretty much clear that he definitely, if he did read this book, indeed, he would have been definitely exposed to this. And I am
Yeah,
just gobsmacked by the ut re mi fa sol la, right in that,
yeah, yeah.
right in that. And what year was this book?
1776.
Okay, so that's pretty fair
So
along in the 18th century then.
yep, yep. And he basically he wrote this book just after he got back from Italy. So
Okay,
Vogler studied in Italy with Padre Martini, who of course has a connection with Leopold Mozart, and
yeah,
then Volotti.
yeah. Uh, yeah, Volotti. I think he really liked Volotti, right? Because he was kind of progressive compared to Martini.
Yes, yes. I
So
think from what I read, the Martini apparently was really into the Fuchsian
yeah,
approach. The thing is that when we hear these accounts of like, oh, I wasn't into this guy, or like I didn't, I've had
yeah,
teachers in my life where I thought, this is not my favorite teacher, but I think I learned a lot from them, even if I didn't
yeah,
really like them. And historically, when Mozart's kind of denigrating Vogler, like Vogler was amazing, and he clearly was respected. He got the Kapellmeister position, and Mozart didn't. And
yeah,
historic now we listen to Mozart, we don't know Vogler very well, but I think we have to take all of these things with a grain of salt.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I was reading a lot of Tchaikovsky's letters. He was
Yeah,
bashing people left and right. But
yeah,
these are, great composers and stuff. I know, for me, Chopin and Schumann. This Chopin trashing Schumann. Schumann is great.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
told
a lot of marketing, right? I mean, I think as a musician, ultimately you have to market yourself, and
yeah,
there's been different marketing approaches historically, and these tie into the genius narrative and so forth. And I guess part of my work has been to try to understand to strip the genius away and look at these people as regular mortal humans that had
Yeah.
to learn and work and to figure all this stuff out.